Well, the halls of Congress are empty right now thanks to Donald Trump's proposed slush fund. Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune canceled a planned vote-a-rama on the party's ICE funding, a vehicle they also were maybe going to use to funnel taxpayer dollars at Trump's ballroom, unclear, and instead just said, we're done, we're out, sent the chamber home until June. Happy weekend, guys. Nice work if you can get it. Now, this followed an hours-long meeting with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who came into the private Senate Republican caucus lunch, where a bunch of Republicans, some reporting says 25 members, got up and speak to him, dissatisfied with Blanche's answers about Trump's $1.8 billion seditionist boondoggle, and signaled they would help Democrats block both that and the ballroom funding. Then, after the meeting, reporters asked Thune if the White House had consulted him on either of these two main funding initiatives.
Well, it would have been nice if they had consulted. I think they probably would have gotten plenty of advice from lots of folks about it. But it's water under the bridge now, and you play the hand you're dealt, and we'll sort it out from here. But obviously, it became a more complicated and bumpy path than we had hoped for.
Senator Chris Van Hollen's a Democrat of Maryland. He recently grilled the acting attorney general on that $1.8 billion fund during an appropriations hearing. Senator Van Hollen joins me now. So my understanding from the Senate caucus lunch, obviously you were not in there, it's the other caucus, was that they were pretty unhappy with this whole situation. I want to read you just a few more quotes here and get your reaction to what's going on that side. Tillis, imagine that, a fund that's set up to compensate people who assaulted Capitol Police officers. People that have pled guilty to physical acts may actually be able to get compensated. How absurd is that coming out of my mouth? Here's Mitch McConnell. So the nation's top law enforcement officials asking for a slush fund to pay people who assault cops? Utterly stupid, morally wrong, take your pick. It does seem like they found a thing that they won't walk the plank for.
Well, Chris, I think what really upset them was maybe not so much the slush fund, although people like Thom Tillis, who are retiring, have been very vocal about it. But the fact that we were going to offer amendments to the bill that we were supposed to be working on tonight that would have put the question to them, do you want your taxpayer dollars used to make payments to people who have been convicted of violent crimes, including beating up police officers or people who were convicted child molesters? They didn't want to face those votes, and so they decided to go home instead.
I want to be clear about this because this is part of Senate procedure where it can get wonky. But basically, as they're moving through, there are these things we call vote-a-ramas, and it's a period where the minority party can offer amendments, and you got to vote on the amendments. And the way that the majority party gets through the vote-a-rama is you just party line vote all the other party's ones down, right? You were going to offer amendments like, should money go to people that assaulted police officers? Should money go to convicted child molesters? And they were going to have to vote, yes, money should go to them, is basically what you're saying.
Well, that's exactly right, Chris. I also filed another one that said no monies from this slush fund should go to members of Congress. You may recall there are some senators who've been trying to get federal payments to them for what they claim was wrongdoing. So they would have had to also vote on whether or not these public taxpayer dollars would go to themselves or whether they would continue to be eligible under the fund. The amendment would make them ineligible. So that's exactly what's happening. I'm not sure they would have actually risen up against this slush fund unless they were going to be put to the test through their votes. And I made clear, others made clear that we weren't going to get out of there on the vote-a-rama without taking these votes.
Now, they've just delayed things, right? So this is a sort of short-term solution of just like unplug the gaming console from the wall, right? So that they don't have to keep playing. Yeah. But, the game's saved. They're going to come back and it's going to be the same situation. Am I wrong?
Well, that's right. I mean, as you pointed out earlier, the underlying bill here is to provide another $70 billion to a lawless ICE operation, even though there's a huge pipeline of taxpayer dollars already sitting at ICE. So the answer is they will come back. But I think what they're hoping, Chris, is in this intervening week, that the acting attorney general, who really is continuing to act like President Trump's personal attorney, but that he will somehow develop guardrails around this fund. Now, whether he can actually do that now that the cat's already out of the bag, I don't know. But that's what they were, I think, essentially telling him that he needed to do.
Right. Just to be clear, the negotiation is not to get rid of the fund, which itself, I think, is completely lawless and indefensible and essentially a theft of the public purse. But to create some side agreement that says well, the child molesters won't get any, we'll keep the pedophiles out. But I just want to play for this, read this to you. Enrique Otario, who's one of the Proud Boys, who's convicted of seditious conspiracy, very serious, conviction, sentenced to 22 years for seditious conspiracy over the role that he played in that fateful day, said he planned to apply to the fund, assuming he can get between, and this is his words, $2 and $5 million, and then added, "I'm not greedy, but my life was all effed up because of this." The people, those are the people that seem to be ready to get in line for this money.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why the acting attorney general is going to have trouble putting up guardrails. Because if you look at the history of this fund that was just announced the other day, but has been thought about for a while, it is precisely, Chris, to try to reward people like the January 6 rioters, including those who were convicted. I questioned the Attorney General the other day about somebody who'd been part of the riot on January 6th, who'd been pardoned by Donald Trump, who went on to be convicted of child molestation, who was saying to the kids that he molested, you know what, just don't tell people about what I did, and I'll give you some of the money I'm going to get from this slush fund. So all of those January 6 rioters have been anticipating these funds, and that is essentially what it was designed for. So it's going to be hard for the Attorney General to put up enough guardrails here, I think.
Guardrails. I mean, guardrails is really a crazy thing to think about with respect to this thing, Senator Chris Van Hollen. Thanks for your time tonight.